Welcome to Season 8 of Merschman Seeds Cup of Joe. On this episode, we are on location in the field at our drill plot in West Point, Iowa. Dylan has a corn update on the diseases and insect pests he is seeing this time of year. We talk about nitrogen and sulfur deficiency, identifying it in your fields, and managing these deficiencies. Ben shows 3 different Merschman PowerCore Enlist corn hybrids and explains how your corn plant builds yield.
Welcome to Merschman Seeds Cup of Joe. Today we are live in the field and I am joined by Dylan and Lynn. And Dylan, what have you been seeing this week?
Yeah, we've been out and about traveling in a lot of fields, and I think some guys maybe gave up a little early. It seems like everything looked good maybe from the road, but once you kind of get in, it seems like we're seeing, even on the ear side of things, we're seeing a little bit more tip back than I think guys were kind of expecting. I haven't really figured out if it's hybrid, if it's each hybrid or what exactly it is, but you get up in there, then we're seeing potassium deficiencies, and we always kind of somewhat see them as we're moving fast in the growing season, and we're still seeing, I think, nitrogen. It's continuing to grow. We kind of talked about it a couple weeks ago. I think it's really starting to get worse. And then the dreaded tar spot, it's really starting to kind of explode the past few days. I think we've gotten past that kind of a wet spell, and now we're hot and humid again, so it's just going to continue to keep growing. And then right now it seems like southern rust has kind of stopped maybe a tad on some of the products. It seems like we know we have it. If you sprayed once, maybe you able to hold it back far enough, you get through R5 maybe on that earlier planted, that full dent, then I think maybe we'll be okay. But then if we're kind of on the later side, it seems like some guys maybe a little bit later into May planted, that's when I think we really need to start paying attention. When it's only going through milk stage right now, we've got a long season to go. So we need to keep paying attention so we can make better decisions come next year, because it's all, each hybrid, it goes through green field a little bit different where it puts it on, and Ben can kind of talk about that when he talks about corn. But then I've seen a lot of kind of rootworm beetles, western and northern, come in just walking around. They're flying around, so I think we need to rethink kind of maybe what we're doing, or kind of different ways to attack that plant. And this has been on rotational ground too that we're seeing them in, so it could be coming from neighbors of corn on corn scenarios, or anything. So the big thing with that is they're going to start to lay eggs here August. We're already in August, we're moving right along, so this is towards the end of July, kind of middle through August, they're going to start to lay eggs. So that's something that we need to really think about.
Yeah, so I'm going to back you up, and we're going to take each one of those things that you've seen, and we're going to talk just a little bit about it. So let's go to the pollination segment, because we have some of these guys that planted their corn. They were either in that late April time frame, and this is semi-geography specific, but it's still widespread at the same time. So if they're in their late April time frame or the early May, even getting into the middle of May time frame, because of the heat that we had and how the corn compensates for itself, it seems like those, not necessarily late planting conditions, but later, not the very first stuff that went in the ground, it seems like it all pollinated about the same time. And we're seeing a lot of, we talked about tassel wrap probably 3 or 4 weeks ago, but this later planted corn, the stuff that was planted after the first round, that April 10th through the 18th, whatever that number is, but the stuff that was planted later is now experiencing, in some instances, is experiencing pollination issues, and a lot of that has to do with the amount of moisture that we were having in the morning. Yeah. So you listen to Ken Ferry, he's been in the industry for 40-50 years now, and the way he talks, that the corn plant, the tassel, will drop pollen till about 11:30 in the morning, and that has to do with heat. And it will not drop pollen if we are seeing heavy dews, fogs, and rains in the mornings on those silks, because those silks are not viable. So it's a protection mechanism. Well, unfortunately, in the protection mechanism, on those late April, early May planted fields, we're seeing some tip back, because the bottom side of the corn plant would have pollinated, but the top side missed out on it. So where we had the potential prior to tassel, you're looking at 50-55 kernels in length. We've seen a lot of fields that got pulled back to that 30, 35, 36 range. So we were over in Champaign, Illinois at the Dr. Fred Belo's crop physiology day yesterday, and there was a lot of talk about that with the customers out there that, well, shoot, we just missed the nick, and what could have been an unbelievable crop is now probably just going to be a good trend line, maybe above trend line yield, just slightly. So
yeah, and those issues with tip back, it's really hard. You know, right now talking with the talk is the markets and some of the funds and managed money looks at NDVI when they're kind of making their assumptions. And if you look at the NDVI, we have fantastic NDVI, but the field and the corn itself will tell just a little bit different story depending on where you're at. So once again, I think for the fourth week in a row, we're going to hammer again, get out in your field and take a look at what that looks like, because that consistency might not be there related to a myriad of issues that we've had.
Right. The second issue you talked about was nitrogen and sulfur deficiencies that we're seeing. So on the trip back, when we were in the daylight, you could definitely tell the areas of the fields that are specifically in corn that are in the lower areas where we are seeing that nitrogen deficiency pop up. You can see fields that are in the hills where you get a full profile of what the fields look like. You can see that ugly yellow pale color at the top of the plant, and really it extends almost all the way down through now. Nitrogen deficiency is going to be coming from the bottom of the plant up, as we've talked about many times. The sulfur deficiency is going to start at the top of the plant and the newest growth, and then work its way back down. So one of the things that Dr. Connor Sybil was talking about is they had a baseball themed presentation yesterday, and nitrogen is sulfur is the key for bringing it all home, because what they are seeing is that the standard 20 to 25 pound recommendation on corn and soybeans for your sulfur may not be enough, especially if there's tie-up of other things that are going on. But if we're really pushing for what potentially was a record yield last year, we're no longer looking at 240 bushel corn or 230 bushel corn from a removal standpoint. We really need to be in that 30 to 35 if we're getting closer to the 300 bushel mark or the 270, 280, because sulfur can very easily be the lowest stave in the barrel at the end when we're trying to finish off here. So there's a lot of those fields that are out there. They're going to continue to get worse. They would have made it through pollination, but you're going to see those ears continue to start shrink back, and you're going to, at the end of the year, you may lose 2 to 3 inches of tip back because you don't have the nutrition required to completely fill those kernels.
From a management standpoint, that's probably would be the best scenario to have as a grower, in my opinion, because sulfur management is really easy to take care of. I mean, it is an application that can come in various forms, whether that be dry, liquid, side dress, pre-plant, on the planter. About every pass we can get out there, we can somehow figure out a way to get sulfur out there. So if that's your lowest hanging fruit, that's a really good position to be in. And for most of our growers, I think that is a position to be at. And with it being very mobile in the soil, it's one that we have to kind of think about too, with the same stroke as nitrogen. You know, there's some properties with sulfur and nitrogen together that they say that the sulfur can have a little bit of a benefactor to the nitrogen management with keeping it available. But you know, when we look at those situations, and I've taken some phone calls on it as well. You know, locally we've had from Thursday to Thursday 7 7/8 inches of rain. Denitrification probably isn't our issue. It's probably pushing it, either pushing it down a little bit further into the profile, or it's compromising the root system, because those areas just sit so wet and so saturated for so long. I wouldn't call it root pruning, but we basically have drowned the plant out in a period of time when it's probably the most critical for that mass flow of nutrients across that root profile.
Yep. Couldn't agree more. We've got to have oxygen for the plant to be able to uptake. And it's interesting that every amino acid, which amino acids build proteins in the plant, as a lot of us know, and every amino acid has nitrogen as a base, and sulfur is key in development on 2 of the amino acids that we need. And it's kind of ironic that typically guys will do a 10-to-1 ratio or a 7-to-1 ratio, but of all the key amino acids, this is something that Sybil talked about yesterday. 2 out of the 50 that are there is a 10-to-1 relationship. So that's why you need about that much nitrogen or to sulfur ratio when it comes to raising a corn crop. So
and that's one of the guys that are being very progressive. You know, I don't know if they've seen the law of diminishing return yet on sulfur. We've got guys that are probably into the 40 pound, and every time they add another 10 pounds, the yield goes up. So it's definitely an interesting dynamic when it comes to that. And it's one that as we get to higher yields and chasing that upper limit, we definitely need to be diligent on how we manage that. But like I said before, it's a very easy one to manage.
Yeah, and to expand with that too, Connor Sybil, he talked about there's so many forms of sulfur like you were talking about, and all their research, they're not seeing any difference between it, whether it be elemental through S10, thio, AMS. So really you get any of those opportunities to put it on either fall or spring,
yep.
You're getting that source all the way to yield. So.
Yeah, and they're doing some interesting research right now. They're talking about, they have a new method of doing, like we all know what cation exchange capacity is. They're taking a new method of how to analyze anion exchange capacity, and there's different soils, specifically some of the stuff that they have in Champaign County actually has a pretty high anion exchange capacity, and they see if you do a 2-year sulfur rate on your corn over there, like a 2-year as in like corn soybean rotation, yep. you take care of your sulfur needs for the corn and then your sulfur needs for the soybeans. There's enough sulfur around that did not leach out from their testing that you could see a 2 to 3 bushel yield bump. I think it was one to two,
yeah.
Somewhere around that range. You could see a yield bump from the residual sulfur that was applied the prior year because it's still out there and it's still beneficial to the soybeans. So. And then he talked about rootworms. Rootworms stink. They're everywhere. It seems like hopefully the rotated acre will take care of those ones that you're flying around and looking at because they are in cornfields right now. The silks are probably for the most part browned off. They're running out of food source at this point. You know, they go after the pollen. They go after the the silks themselves, and then that's when they do start to lay eggs. So we're probably past the point of managing them, but it's definitely notes to take if you're going to be in a corn on corn rotated field, or pay attention and get some sticky traps out for extended diapause.
Yeah, and I would even say, you know, it seems like if you walk out to a corn plant and a soybean, volunteer corn and a soybean plant, I bet there will be a couple beetles on the tassel or on the silk. It seems like every year we see it, and you may not think it, but just for something to look at. If you didn't spray for your volunteer corn, if you got some out there, just go take a look. So
yep, that's key. It's one of the things that I never looked for when I was a young agronomist, and now it's definitely you pay really close attention to it. And that volunteer corn, from a mass scale, you wouldn't think it'd be that big of a deal for a detriment to your soybean yields, but it can be a huge detriment if it's harboring pests next year that could potentially blow up and cause some issues. So it's a good thing. It's multi-purpose to get the volunteer corn cleaned up. One thing that I did have here, so you've been seeing me playing with these 3 years that are in my hand. One of the things that I wanted to talk about, and we've talked about it before, but it's just so key at this time frame when we're sitting here looking at corn. I have 3 ears from 3 different hybrids that are here in the plot, and the plot was planted
May 9th.
May 9th, so it's a little bit later. We were waiting on getting our planter all set up and ready for this year. But so it's planted May 9th. We are in the milk stage on this corn, so you can definitely tell what pollinated and what didn't at this point. And one of the key reasons for why we want to diversify genetics, and why you really want to know a lot about what and how your corn plant builds yield, is the difference between what these 3 varieties are. Here I have 111 day. And this product, once it gets through blister, never looks very good. It's always kind of a sleeper hybrid that we have. So this product right here does not put the kernel count on, but it really flexes in girth. So you don't see the length out of this product. You definitely see the girth. All 3 of these are 16 around. They were all pulled out of a 34,000 plant population. So we have population trials in through here, and they were all equidistant spaced, so I didn't grab like a huge one. So they're all fairly representative. But this product here is not as affected by pollination issues as what other style products are, because it is a girthy ear and you're not as dependent on kernel flex. When you move over to the other extreme on what that would look like is the 113 day. This 113 day it's probably its biggest detriment, or the hardest thing that can hit this one's yield is by not getting through pollination very well, because it doesn't put on the girth. Kernel count is so important for what the yield looks like on the 2413 C-30 that we have. So it's nice to balance things out, but you may plant a 111 and 113 day, and if they build the yield the same way, and they're probably going to pollinate fairly closely to each other, you're not really spreading your risk and diversifying. So when we look at this product, once we make it through pollination, it's extremely yield stable. So it's more about how many plants per acre you have out there, how many kernels per ear you have out there, and it seems to make it through the heat and the drought stress really nicely, which is why this one does phenomenal on variable soils, and I think it has some strength in the more drought prone areas, and I really like it from that standpoint. The product, the 111 day that I threw down there, its biggest detriment is if you don't have adequate rainfall, or you have a really fast finish to harvest, and you're kind of in that drought scenario and you don't get those rains that you need in the month of July and August, it's going to pull back and you're not going to get the kernel depth on it, and you're going to see a yield reduction in that instance, and you're not going to like that one quite as much as something that's more yield stable like this product. And then we have the Magic 2512 C30, and it is almost a perfect blend between those two products. So we have a lot of depth. We had lots of division factors by 50, 60, 70 last year when we were doing our kernel counts and our yield estimates. So it does throw on a very healthy, nice, deep kernel, but it also has the length to compensate. So it can get nipped on both ends, but it also has the flexibility to perform extremely well. It has that ability to shift and move and transfer, reallocate assimilates when it comes to doing the grain fill, which is why I think this product here works extremely well from east to west. It can handle the Nebraska droughts in the heat and the sunlight that happens, and it can also perform extremely well in central Illinois, where you got 30 feet of black dirt and tile ground, and flex out and be able to handle filling to the maximum ability of that corn plant. So that's our yearly reminder. I think we probably talk about it a couple times a year, but this time of year it's just perfect because you can see how each one of these builds yield, and it's extremely important when making variety selections. So I really like all three of these products when you plant them as a package. I have the 115 day, the 2515T down there. It's a little bit more like the 111 day. Get in touch with your local Merschman Seeds sales representative, and they will definitely walk you through how each one of these products builds yield, because it's important that you're not laying too many eggs in one basket, and that you're stretching either your maturity out or your fill types out when it comes to having successful pollination and grain yield at the end of the year.
Yeah, we were just talking before we started filming about, related to that, in a conversation with a grower, in his conversation that he had with a consultant, that they're seeing preliminary weights on some of these ear weights be considerably less than what it was the year before. And I think that's important to kind of remember with the caveats as we're talking with some of those style of products, that it might have an off year this year. It was one of the highest yielding ones last year. If next year brings conditions that are similar to that, I mean, it's one that you don't want to put, you can't afford to not have it in the lineup, but it's extremely important to diversify, because that is, we were probably racking through the R stages that 20 to 25 days. I mean, whatever the bare minimum on the R stages are, which is very detrimental to the fill of those kernels. And we have an opportunity here where those aren't completely done. Some of the early planted stuff we're probably hard dent. We have some opportunity to add some more weight still, but as you guys can probably see, we're about ready to start to break into a sweat here, where our nighttime lows really aren't dropping down considerable amounts. It was still 71 this morning, I think, when I got up at 10 a.m. So, but no, we're just not getting, we're getting good weather for growing, but it's not perfect weather. And I think last year, when we think back to last year, and I mean, probably the best year ever we had in Southeast Iowa, we did have some nighttime lows that was probably aided by a little bit of Canadian wildfire, brought that temperature down. We had a lot of good respiration days, and we look at this year, it'd be really interesting to see it in hindsight when we talk about stress days from a weather standpoint. I think we're going to have probably a record amount of stress days in relation to that. Now, don't get me wrong, we're going to have a phenomenal crop, but it's kind of one of those, a little bit farmer mentality, what could have been. We could have had 2 years of back-to-back just record-breaking yields. I'm pulling back a little bit, being a little bit more of a negative Nancy locally here. And then same with the beans, just to end on beans real quick. Some of those same problems that we're talking about on corn, I think we're going to see on beans. Your low-lying areas, when you have ponding water, you and I talked about it on Monday a little bit, that beans right now are coming into that peak period where they need nitrogen to help the pod fill. And we're getting a little bit further beyond than what the nodules are being able to produce, so they're relying on the organic matter. Well, right now in those ponded areas, we've basically killed that rhizosphere for at least 30 days. So we're in this kind of a really bad delta where we're not getting anything from drown out nodulations. Actually, they're going backwards, and then we're trying to fill those last, that top probably quarter of the canopy that's left to be filled. So I think we're going to have a little bit of pullback on that. The great part locally for those that have planted early is, we've have 21 to 22 main stem nodes with 4 pod clusters on it. We have potential there. We always see a little bit of pullback, but we were able to build a bigger factory early, so we'll be able to withstand a little bit of that versus, unfortunately, somebody who probably planted on in June, or God forbid those that were even later than that. You have an opportunity to fill a little bit later, but we're just not catching a great time for them. It's going to happen a little bit lower in the plant, which is probably not overly ideal, because we definitely wanted to make sure that our lower half of the plant is well taken care of, and then because we'll start aborting from the top and aborting from the branches. But overall, I'm still very positive about the year we're going to have, but some weather events that are happening here at the end of the year, we just have to be realistic on our yield expectations.
Yep. Nope, I completely agree. So, anything else? You gonna get us out of here with a joke?
Not a joke. 2 jokes.
Oh, working overtime.
Working overtime.
You had time to do that even after getting up at 10 o'clock this morning?
At the time of filming, for those that don't know, by the time hair and makeup was done, it really pushed the schedule, but we got it done. Why do golfers hate cake?
No idea.
Because they might get a slice. So after that joke, I just applied for a job down at the local diner. Told them I really bring a lot to the table. Man, you're a tough crowd today. Tough crowd.
Well, it took me a second, to be real honest with you. It took me a second. So, bring a lot to the table.
I bring a lot to the table.
Yes, at a diner. You'd be delivering
big
food.
Arms.
Yep.
A lot of carrying capacity.
Yeah, nope, that makes sense.
We're going to go to the whiteboard after this and draw it out for Ben to explain it. So, yeah, to finish off too, just want to make a quick note. Product guides are available. You can view them online, and we also just finished up a campaign. 40,000 of these are going to be distributed throughout the mail through the Midwest and Mid-South. So if you don't get one, contact your local Merschman dealer and get your hands on this. We're pretty excited for the portfolio and the lineup coming for this year. So get a look at it, and we'll be looking forward to talking with you and getting an order on the books.
Yep. And with that, we appreciate everybody's time tuning in from podcasts, YouTube, Facebook, everything like that. Hope you found something insightful out of today's discussion, and we'll catch you next week. Thanks.